I remember the day we met as though it was just yesterday. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the world seems to blur into soft grays and people rush past each other without so much as a glance. I was alone, of course, always was. But then, as I sat there, the warm scent of coffee enveloping the small cafe, I saw him. He wasn't extraordinary in any visible way, but there was something about his presence that caught my attention. He sat across from me, his eyes meeting mine for a brief second. I quickly looked away, not wanting to seem strange, but I felt something shift in the air. It was as though our worlds collided for a moment. And in that tiny fleeting moment, a connection formed. He smiled, just a small gesture, but it felt like an invitation. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice calm and soothing, yet with an edge of curiosity. It was funny because I hadn't even realized I was staring at him until he spoke. But somehow, without hesitation, I nodded. He pulled out the chair and sat down, uninvited. But it felt so right. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful, as though we had known each other for much longer than a few minutes. "Not a fan of crowded spaces either?" he asked, noticing the empty seats around us. I shook my head. "I prefer peace, I guess." "That makes two of us." He smiled again, a warmth that reached his eyes. He introduced himself as Adam. And just like that, we started talking. The conversation was effortless. We spoke about everything and nothing all at once. The books we liked, the places we wanted to visit, the things we feared. There was no forced small talk. He asked the right questions and I answered with a sense of openness that I hadn't felt in years. There was an honesty in his words that mirrored my own. It felt like I had finally met someone who understood me, not just on the surface but deep down. The hours passed by without either of us realizing it. We lost track of time, absorbed in the rhythm of our shared thoughts. By the end of that afternoon, as we stood up to leave, something inside me told me that this wasn't just another random encounter. "I'll see you soon?" he asked, his voice softer than before, as though it were a question that he desperately wanted the answer to. I nodded, though I didn't know why I did. It just felt right. Over the next few weeks, we met up regularly. Each time our connection deepened. I found myself sharing things I had never told anyone before. Fears, regrets, things I'd buried deep within myself for so long. Adam listened, never judging, only offering quiet support. His eyes never wavered, always focused on me, as if he was absorbing every word I said. It was comforting. The trust was effortless, as though it had always been there. We began to spend almost every day together, our routines merging in ways that made it seem like we had always been a part of each other's lives. We didn't need to fill the silences with words. Just being in each other's presence was enough. I hadn't felt this way in a long time. Seen, heard, understood. It was as if we were two halves of a whole, and I could finally breathe without feeling like I was drowning in my own solitude. One night, under the glow of the streetlights, as we walked through the park, he stopped and turned to face me. "I don't know what it is about you," he said, his voice carrying a seriousness I hadn't heard before. "But there's something I trust about you, more than I've trusted anyone in my life." My heart skipped a beat. Those words, they weren't just casual. They were profound. For the first time in a long while, I felt something shift within me. The weight of his words pressed against my chest, and I didn't know how to respond. But I didn't need to. The air between us was thick with unspoken understanding. "I trust you too," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. It was the truth, and it felt like I had just opened up a door to something I could never take back. We stood there, staring at each other, a moment frozen in time. And in that brief pause, I felt as though I was walking on a tightrope, the world around me suspended in the balance of this trust we had just built. It was fragile, delicate even, but there was something undeniably powerful about it, something that made me believe that, no matter what came next, we would always have each other. But I didn't know then, couldn't have known, that trust, once built, can become a weapon, and weapons can be turned against you. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always hit you like a thunderstorm. Sometimes it creeps up like a slow-moving fog, wrapping around you so gradually that you don't even realize it's there until it's too late. I didn't notice it at first, the small changes in Adam. Or maybe I chose not to notice. We'd been so close, the kind of friends who could finish each other's sentences, laugh at the same inside jokes, and share the deepest parts of ourselves. He was the person I'd come to trust more than anyone in my life. Yet something started to shift. Something so subtle that it slipped right under my radar. It began on a Tuesday, I remember. We'd made plans to meet at the same cafe where we'd first met. I arrived early, like I always did, enjoying the quiet before the rush of people would flood in. Adam was never late, but that day, he was. 15 minutes passed, then 30. By the time the hour was up, I was starting to feel uneasy. I shot him a text. Nothing. Another one. Still no response. At first, I convinced myself that something must have come up. Maybe he was caught in traffic or something had come up at work. Adam was always busy, always juggling his life with so many moving parts. He'd been that way from the start, but I never minded it. I understood him. But that night, as I sat there waiting for him, an unfamiliar feeling gnawed at me. Was he avoiding me? When he finally showed up, he was different. His eyes darting around the room, as if he was looking for someone. When he spotted me, his face broke into a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hey, sorry I'm late. Got caught up with some stuff and see," he said, his voice casual, but there was something off about it. I nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled in my stomach. We went through the motions of ordering our drinks, talking about our usual topics, but something was wrong. The conversation felt forced, as though we were both playing a part. It was small things at first. He didn't laugh at my jokes like he normally would, and there was an edge to his words that I couldn't quite place. His responses were short, almost clipped, and then something that hadn't happened before started to unfold. He started making excuses to leave early, cutting our time together short. At first, I thought it was just the stress of work, but then it happened again and again. One evening, we had plans to go to a movie, something we'd been looking forward to for days. I arrived at the theater an hour early, something I'd never done before, but the anticipation felt exciting. As the time ticked on and Adam still hadn't shown, I texted him. No response. I called him twice. Nothing. When he finally picked up, there was a rush of words on the other end, as if he'd been caught off guard. "I'm sorry, I can't make it tonight." Something came up, he said. There was a slight tremor in his voice, but he quickly covered it up. "Are you sure? We planned this all week." "I know, I'm really sorry. Can we do it some other time? His words were fast, and I could tell he was already halfway through a lie. It didn't sit right with me. Adam, is everything okay? I asked, my voice quiet. There was a pause. A long, painful pause. Yeah, everything's fine. I just need to take care of something. We'll talk later, all right? He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at the phone screen, feeling that familiar sting in my chest. Something was changing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Days passed and things only worsened. Adam became more and more distant. He stopped texting me back in a timely manner. He stopped making eye contact when we met. The little things we used to share, the quiet moments when no words were needed, vanished. His laugh, once genuine and full of warmth, felt forced, like he was trying too hard. He didn't confide in me the way he used to. Whenever I asked about his day or what was going on in his life, his answers were vague, almost as if he was hiding something from me. But what? I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself it was just a phase, that he was just going through something. Everyone has their off days, right? But then came the night that broke me. I was at home, sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when a notification popped up. It was a post from Adam's social media. Normally I wouldn't pay much attention, but this post was different. There was a picture of Adam with someone I didn't recognize. They were smiling, their arms around each other, clearly close. Too close. I clicked on the post, hoping I was mistaken, hoping it was just a friendly picture. But as I scrolled through the comments, my heart sank. The caption read, "Great night with my best friend Sarah." Sarah? I didn't know any Sarah. I felt my stomach drop. The world around me seemed to blur as I stared at the photo. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. Why didn't he tell me about her? Why was he spending time with her instead of me? What was happening? I couldn't stop the flood of thoughts that rushed in. Maybe she was just a friend, I told myself. But the way they were standing together, arms wrapped around each other, like they shared a secret, it felt wrong. I thought back to the last few weeks. The cancelled plans, the evasive answers, the sudden distance. It all clicked together, a puzzle I had ignored for too long. The betrayal was no longer a whisper in the back of my mind. It was loud, undeniable, and it hurt more than I could put into words. I messaged Adam, my hands trembling as I typed. "Who's Sarah?" He replied almost immediately. "She's just a friend. Don't worry about it." Just a friend. The word stung. But there was something in his tone that felt different this time. There was no reassurance, no comfort, only a coldness that hadn't been there before. I waited for him to call, to explain, to reassure me that everything was okay. But the call never came. Instead, the silence between us grew. It's odd how the mind works. We all know the warning signs when something's off, yet we ignore them. I ignored the truth for as long as I could, convincing myself that it was just my imagination running wild, that maybe I was overreacting. But the deeper I sank into that denial, the more it became apparent. There was no way to ignore it anymore. The truth was staring me right in the face, and I could no longer look away. After the night I saw the photo with Sarah, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I didn't hear from Adam for days, and every attempt to reach out was met with silence. I sat in my apartment, waiting for an explanation, but nothing came. The familiar hum of my phone was now a constant reminder of his absence. Each ring an echo of a friendship I could feel slipping through my fingers. But then, on the fifth day, I received a message. It was from Adam, but not in the way I expected. The text was short, almost curt. "We need to talk." At first, I felt a rush of relief. Maybe he was going to explain everything, make it right. But something in my gut told me it wouldn't be that simple. I agreed to meet him at the park where we'd spent countless evenings talking, laughing, and confiding in each other. The place had once felt like a sanctuary, a safe space where nothing could go wrong. But now, I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was waiting there for me. When I arrived, the park was eerily quiet. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty benches and winding paths. I couldn't see Adam anywhere, so I sat down on our usual bench, my heart pounding in my chest. The world felt heavy, and I didn't know why. I didn't realize it then, but I was already standing on the edge of something I couldn't undo. It was then that I heard it, footsteps approaching from behind. I turned around, my pulse quickening, expecting to see Adam. But it wasn't him. It was Sarah. She was standing a few feet away, her expression unreadable. Her eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that made me feel uneasy. She was tall, her dark hair falling over her shoulders in messy waves. Her clothes, simple but stylish, but it wasn't her appearance that made my stomach churn. It was the way she looked at me, as though she knew something I didn't. "Hey," she said, her voice too calm for the situation. "I'm Sarah." I nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Where was Adam? Why wasn't he here? And why was she here instead of him? "I know who you are," I replied, my voice tighter than I intended. "Where's Adam?" She smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was cold, almost as if she was trying to hide something. "He's not coming," she said softly, almost too softly. "He's busy." A chill ran down my spine, and I felt the first stirrings of panic bubbling up. This wasn't right. None of this was right. "Busy? What do you mean? We had plans." She took a step closer, her gaze never leaving mine. "I think you know exactly what's going on. You've been ignoring the signs, but you're smart. You know how it is." I shook my head, a sense of dread crawling up my throat. "What are you talking about?" She paused for a long moment, as if considering her next words carefully. "Adam and we've been seeing each other for a while now." "I thought you'd figured it out by now." The world seemed to stop. My mind went blank. I couldn't process what she was saying. Adam? With her? My heart raced, my breath shallow. My friend, my closest friend, had been lying to me the entire time. I felt nauseous, my vision blurring. Why? Why didn't he just tell me? Sarah shrugged, her expression cold and distant. You don't get it, do you? He didn't tell you because he didn't want to lose you. He knew you wouldn't understand. But now, it doesn't matter. We're done pretending. The words hit me like a slap across the face. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was complete, irreversible. My trust, my belief in this person I had called a friend was shattered beyond repair. But there was more. There was something in the way Sarah was looking at me. Something that felt far more sinister than simple jealousy or heartbreak. I don't understand, I whispered, barely able to breathe. You will soon enough, she said, her voice growing darker. You'll understand when it's too late. Just as the words left her mouth, a figure appeared in the distance, walking slowly toward us. It was Adam. My heart skipped a beat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He looked different. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, as though he hadn't slept in days. There was a coldness to his expression that I didn't recognize. He reached us and stopped short, glancing at Sarah before turning his gaze on me. For the first time in weeks, he spoke to me. "You shouldn't have come," he said flatly. His voice had no warmth, no emotion. It was as though he was speaking to a stranger, not someone he'd once called his best friend. "Adam, what is this?" My voice trembled, my mind struggling to make sense of everything. "What's going on? Why have you been avoiding me?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "You never understood, did you? You never saw the truth. Sarah and I are done pretending. And you? You've been nothing more than a pawn in this little game." I took a step back, feeling my chest tighten with panic. "What do you mean, a pawn? I don't understand. What game?" Sarah stepped closer to me, her smile growing wider, her eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. "The truth is, Adam and I have been working together for a long time now. You were never part of the plan, but you were useful. Now, it's time for you to go." The words sent a shiver through my spine. "Go? What are you talking about?" Adam's lips curled into a twisted smile, and for the first time, I saw the coldness in his eyes that I had never seen before. He wasn't the person I trusted all this time. This wasn't my friend. "This is the end of the road for you," he said softly. "We've already made our decisions." Before I could react, Sarah grabbed my arm with surprising strength, her fingers digging into my skin as she pulled me toward the trees. I struggled against her, but it was no use. Adam followed behind, his expression unreadable, his steps deliberate, as though he were walking toward an inevitable conclusion. And in that moment, I realized what was happening. It wasn't just a betrayal of friendship. It was something far darker, something I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. They had planned this, every part of it. And now, I was trapped in their web. The horror wasn't just unfolding around me. It was closing in on me, suffocating me in ways I couldn't escape. The grip Sarah had on my arm felt like iron, unyielding and tight. The more I struggled, the more it seemed to grow, an anchor pulling me deeper into something I couldn't escape. My heart thudded in my chest, louder than ever, as Adam's hollow gaze followed us from behind. I tried to reason with them, tried to make sense of what was happening, but my words fell flat, drowned out by the growing weight of impending doom. "Let me go," I gasped, pulling against Sarah's hold. But she didn't even flinch. Her grip tightened, her expression still cold. Her eyes filled with something far more unsettling than any anger or hatred I could have imagined. "Struggling won't do you any good," she murmured, her voice almost gentle. "We've already made up our minds." I wasn't sure what she meant, but a sickening feeling crawled down my spine. And I'd never been so scared in my life. It was as though my very soul was screaming, warning me that what I was about to experience was something beyond betrayal. It was something evil. We reached the trees and the world around us grew even darker. The park that had once been a familiar, safe space now felt alien, distorted, like a scene from a nightmare. The rustling of leaves in the wind seemed louder, more sinister. The shadows stretched longer than they should have, swallowing the paths ahead. As we approached a secluded spot near the woods, Sarah stopped abruptly. She released her hold on my arm, and I stumbled forward, trying to regain my balance. The air was thick, the oppressive silence suffocating. I could hear my own breath, ragged and shallow, mixing with the haunting rustle of the trees. Adam stood a few feet away, his hands shoved into his pockets, his posture rigid, as though he were awaiting something. The sight of him, my best friend, now felt like a cruel mockery. This wasn't the person I had shared memories with. This was a stranger. "You should have stayed away," Adam said finally, his voice devoid of emotion, as though he were talking to a distant acquaintance, not someone he once considered family. "We never wanted to hurt you, but we did what we had to do." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about? What do you mean? Why are you doing this?" Sarah's cold smile never wavered as she tilted her head, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because you were always in the way. You were never meant to be part of this. You were just a pawn in a game you didn't even know you were playing." I shook my head, my vision swimming. I could hardly keep my thoughts straight. "I trusted you. You were my friend. Why, Adam? Why are you doing this to me?" Adam took a slow step forward, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes. A hint of regret, of doubt. But it was gone just as quickly as it appeared. "Trust? That's the thing, isn't it?" He shook his head. "You trusted the wrong person. We both did." "Stop!" I shouted, my voice trembling with desperation. "This isn't you. You can't do—" But Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp and cold. "It's already done. It's over." Without warning, she pushed me to the ground, and my hands scraped against the dirt as I fell. I gasped, barely able to catch my breath. Panic surged through me, my mind racing with the thought of escape. I couldn't stay here. I had to run. But as I looked up, my body frozen in terror, I realized something was wrong. The trees around us had shifted. The shadows had grown longer, more menacing, and the atmosphere had grown heavier, suffocating. The path that had once been so clear was now obscured by an almost unnatural fog. The park, my once safe haven, felt alive with a darkness that twisted and coiled in ways I couldn't comprehend. And then I saw it. In the distance, just beyond the trees, a figure appeared, draped in a long, tattered cloak. The figure moved silently, its presence barely noticeable at first, like a shadow in the corner of my eye. But as it grew closer, I realized the shape wasn't human. It was something else, something far older, far darker, and much more malevolent. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My mouth went dry as I watched the figure draw nearer, its form shifting in and out of focus, like something that shouldn't exist in the world I knew. The air grew colder, the very essence of the park seeming to twist and warp with every passing second. Adam and Sarah stood unmoving, as though they knew exactly what was happening, and maybe even welcomed it. They didn't speak, didn't move a muscle. It was as if they were waiting for something, for me perhaps. "Do you see it now?" Sarah whispered, her voice like ice. "This is what you never understood. You were never meant to be here. We brought you here to finish this." Before I could react, the figure was upon us. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and its face was hidden beneath a hood of shadows. What little of its face that was visible was a dark, twisted mess of contorted features. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. Its eyes gleamed a dull, soulless white. And as it drew closer, I felt a wave of overwhelming terror wash over me. It was a terror unlike anything I had ever known. A deep, bone-chilling fear that made every part of my body freeze in place. And then I realized the figure was not just some eerie shadow. It was them. Adam and Sarah weren't just betraying me for personal gain. They were working with something far more sinister. They were servants of this thing. I opened my mouth to scream, to run, to do anything, but my body wouldn't respond. My legs were frozen. My breath caught in my throat. The figure extended its hand toward me, and I felt a jolt of coldness rush through my body, as if the life was being drained from me. Adam's voice, calm and devoid of emotion, echoed in the growing darkness. "We've been waiting for this day, for you to come here. You were never meant to leave. This was always the plan." I tried to pull away, to escape, but there was nowhere to run. The shadows closed in around me, suffocating, and the figure's touch grew colder with every passing second. The last thing I saw before the darkness consumed me was Sarah's smile. It was no longer cold or distant, but wide and sinister. A smile of pure satisfaction.